Let's talk about Chapter 11, Office Policies and Procedures. Learning objectives are listed in the beginning of the chapter. Just a few key terms. That's very helpful when there's just a few. Page 222 in the book, the introduction starts the chapter. Creating patient education pamphlets is something that is important in medical offices or any kind of healthcare facility, actually. And of course, it needs to pertain to that demographic or that population of patients that you're going to see. Various languages would be great, covering as many conditions or information as possible to hand to patients. When you're in a healthcare setting and you tell a patient something very important, if it's not the best news, they're not going to recall what you say beyond that. And even maybe it's a patient situation that may not be so bad. It could be good news or next steps, but the patient needs to go home with something in writing. I promise you, in a situation where you visit a doctor's office and there's important information being exchanged, the person, the patient, and their family members are not going to recall every single thing you said. So, patient information or patient education pamphlets are an important part of having a medical office. And your policies and procedures can help dictate what goes in the pamphlet, how the pamphlet's created, who approves it, who prints it, all the things. Page 223, creating a personnel manual. So this is important. When you are an office manager, it's your responsibility to create a manual with your expectations, your policies, processes, maybe even benefits, all the things. Page 224, 225 do a great job of listing out and bulleting different ideas to include in a manual. Manuals are very important. That way you have a guide to hold your employees or your team members to a standard, and even yourself, you're part of that too, and what is expected. You can't discipline or you can't hold somebody accountable if the expectations are not in writing. Page 225 in Chapter 11, creating the policies and procedures for the medical office is discussed. Table 11.1 does a great job. Ancillary policies is what that table contains. 227, so a mission statement is very important. If you Google your local hospital systems and maybe even some of your doctor's offices and find their mission statements, it's something that you would want to align your own personal and beliefs with prior to becoming an employee at that establishment, and maybe even prior to becoming a patient of that establishment. 227 also discuss organizational charts. These are important. Chain of command is wildly important. That type of information, who is your boss and who's your boss's boss, and well, who's above them. That can always, the chain of command can always be found within an organizational chart. Clinical procedures is mentioned on the bottom of page 227. Clinical procedures are different than administrative procedures. Clinical procedures have to do with, things like starting an IV or giving a medication, doing a dressing change, whereas administrative procedures is bookkeeping, accounting, patient's records, that type of thing, which actually, I should say, patient records release. Clinical does include documenting what you've done in a patient record, so I didn't say that correctly to start with. But administrative procedures, when it comes to patient records, is actually releasing the patient records, maybe faxing another doctor's office the requested information, as long as the patient has given approval, of course. Infection control procedures on page 229, that is regulated by OSHA. Quality improvement and risk management procedures are listed at the bottom of that page. Risk management is very important. You don't want anybody to get injured. You don't want anybody to sue. You want to avoid that type of stuff. Not that you can always be perfect, but you do want to manage and keep your risks low for great outcomes and quality. I mean, anything that can be done to improve quality, whether it's feedback or complaints or what have you. That's discussed on page 230. And that is it for chapter 11. Please let me know if you have any questions.